the success rate. But please bear in mind that a lot of what we do fund comes in through investigator-initiated applications. And that's really because we believe that your ideas are much better than anything we can write on paper, hence why you're writing the grants and we're looking at them. Okay, so Vivek asked me, sort of my third thing that I wanted to say was, Vivek asked if I could say a few truths about the funding process. So one of the truths is, and I'm sure you've all seen this, that it's a very uncertain world, and it's becoming a lot more uncertain. And we see that with everything from, for example, the renewal rates for R01s. That rate of renewal for R01s has fallen dramatically over the last few years. Even for things like submitting a revised application, that success rate, essentially, you hope if you're responding to the critiques you get in the summary statement, you hope your score is going to go up with your revised application. Increasingly, we're seeing that that's not true. The reviewers are coming back with other complaints. And it comes back to this idea of, to some extent, it's community. All it takes is a few people in the study section not to like what you're doing. You need to be able to persuade someone in that study section to stand up and be an advocate for your work. If everyone looks down and goes, well, that seems like a nice project, but no one's willing to stand up and champion it, there's probably a good chance you're not going to get funded. So you need to be able to resonate with the people in the study section. In advance, NIH publishes the rosters for all our standing study sections. That's the audience you're writing for. Those are the people, those are the biggest hurdles you have to get past in order to get your application funded. And it really is becoming a more uncertain process. And we try to work on different ways to decrease some of that uncertainty in the funding process, and we have a number of different initiatives in that area. But I think that the truth is that it's definitely becoming more uncertain than it was a decade ago. I think the next truth is grant writing. I think as Vivek said, you can have the best ideas in the world, but if you can't communicate them in those 12 pages or 6 pages, no one's going to buy into your concept. It has to be the top of their pile going into that study section review. It has to be the one that they think is going to change the world, that they are going to stand up and champion in front of everybody else in that study section. And that's important to remember. You're relying on those 3 people in that you're likely to be your reviewers, being willing to stand up in front of the other 20-odd people in that room and say, I understand this, this is what I understand, this is why I think it's going to be significant. So, they're essentially acting as your proxy. So think about whenever you're writing grants from that perspective. And a lot of my colleagues would argue grant writing is quite formulaic. Depending on the type of work you're doing, you can almost have a template, fill in the words, the specific details of what you're doing, and that's what will lead to success. So there is definitely a perception out there that it can be quite formulaic. The way you lay out all the details can be done in a very reproducible way, and that helps, at least on the minds of reviewers, if they've got a pile of 15 applications to read. They're seeing something well laid out. You're addressing all these issues with thinking about alternative approaches. What are your metrics for success? Are you really selling the significance and impact of what you're doing? So there is an argument that having followed one of these templated approaches makes sure that you're addressing all the parts of an application that the reviewers will be looking for, and it doesn't give them the room to, okay, I should keep clicking my slides. I've forgotten about that. This is just to say we have around, I think, 80 or 90 different funding mechanisms we use. These are the most common ones. The one thing I really wanted to say here, and that was actually next to my list, R21s. So every round we return about 100 R01s without review. And bearing in mind that I come from an institute that represents about 1% of NIH, it's worth bearing in mind if you're submitting an R01, please talk to us in advance, because if you submit it, particularly aimed at an institute that doesn't support R21s, we're just going to return it back to you. So you'll have wasted your time. It'll 3-month delay in your application. You need to think about where you're submitting to. So don't force it. Don't pick a mechanism that an institute you're interested in doesn't support. And I think, also just to echo that, think about it as a marathon. You'll get some statements back. If you look at the success rate for new investigators for first-time applications, around 2%. So if you get funded on your first application, you are amongst an extremely small number of people. So think of it as a marathon. You're going to have to, it's hard to get that summary statement back. It's hard to read those critiques of your work. You need to be resilient. You need to think about this as a marathon and how to get through that process and how to think out your strategy over the next few years. Okay, so that was the third item. I can share many more truths. I think also just to echo that point as well, that it is a small world. That people who will be reviewing your applications could quite possibly be in this room. They're going to be the people who listen to your conferences. They're going to be your peers at the same university. So it's important to remember that. And it turned out that I ended up being the program officer for the person who was my master's thesis advisor. I'm sure he didn't expect to see that one coming. And it so happened to do a really good job. I think as Melissa said, we don't sign off on the funding, which is probably a good thing, because it means we don't have to go to jail whenever we misappropriate funds. But it does mean that we do get to manipulate things around the edge, and that's why it is worth making sure we're aware of who you are, what your career trajectories are like, because we do care about you. We keep in touch with a lot of the people we fund as new investigators, because we do care about where you're going. We do see science from a slightly different perspective, but we're all former scientists. We're not bureaucrats, but we're former scientists. And, we all have our preferences, but we do try to keep an eye on the field where it's going. But we also gossip. This is probably not a well-known fact, but, we do talk to your students. We find out we have a pretty good idea of who are bad mentors. And that, that does end up feeding into the process somewhere along the lines. We generally hear about people moving institutions before you tell us that you're moving institutions. If you start creating a hassle for us in terms of the paperwork, you're last minute telling us you're not moving institutions, and then expect a miracle to happen, you're not going to create a lot of friends. So, I think it is a small world. Do nurture those interactions as much as you can. Okay, my last point. I'll just keep clicking through these. I have no idea where exactly I am. The good thing, of course, is that these are all going to be on the Google Share Drive. So you can go back and look at them on there. Just some advice is, thinking about a formula for how you want to lay out your specific stage. So my last point was really about opportunities. So as much as there are challenges at the moment, there is a great deal of uncertainty. There are also a lot of opportunities. I mentioned we have 900 different funding opportunities. We have new programs starting all the time. If you talk to us, you share good ideas with us, you persuade NIH it's a great idea to be launching an initiative in a particular area. It's a good way of helping to support an emerging field and for establishing yourself as a leader. We see that happening all the time. So that's why talking with people, trying to build up both a broad concept of what you're doing as well as the specific details of your individual project, getting people together as a community and arguing for why NIH, NSF, other parts of the government should be really supporting the work you're doing, why it's going to be significant to our mission. Another opportunity, of course, is to learn about the review process. So we have various ways in which you can get into the system as a reviewer. Even if you don't have NIH funding, we have an early career stage reviewer option. All the study sections generally take on 1 or 2 people each year, generally 1 or 2 people each round, in fact. So it's a good way of learning how not to write an application. So one of the things you discover very quickly in the study section, what study sections are really good at is identifying applications that aren't ready for funding yet. They're not so good at differentiating how good an application is if it's in that top category. So that's one of the things you definitely learn from being a reviewer, is how to very quickly start making an application and work out that it's not ready for funding, or it's just reproducing what other people have done previously. And I think it's an important skill to see. It's as much about understanding what makes a bad application as what makes a good application. I think also the other opportunities are things like this, getting involved in meetings, getting involved with running workshops, writing papers. Not many people know this, but a lot of the program officers at NIH write papers. We're just in the process of writing a paper on body-worn microfluidic devices. So, it's more of a perspective piece, looking at what may come out in the future. But, again, it's sort of a signal of things that we're interested in, directions we're going. And, also it helps us connect with some of the people working in these fields. So if I have to summarize, these are basically the take-home messages. We put out a lot of information. We try to make it as transparent as we can within the NIH. So everything appears on our website. You can see what we're thinking at least 1 or 2 years out in advance. If you're careful about it, we always announce our concepts as we're developing them. You can see what's coming top down whenever you look at our, for example, if you look at our fiscal 17 budget, 2017 budget, or even 2018, you can see our forward plans, and you can try to position yourself to be in a position to take advantage of those. Get to know your program directors. We get paid to talk with you, so please reach out to us. Participate in the workshops, as I said, and review applications that can give you a great sense of how to write a competitive application. So I'll just quickly skip through this. This is just to show, in terms of mHealth research, after 2011, you can start to see that these workshops are having a significant impact. This just gives you a breakdown of which institutes are funding this work, some of the mechanisms that are doing it, some of the, if we pull out the keywords, these are the keywords. These are just 2 of the centers, as you heard. Santosh leads the MG2K Center. This was also mentioned earlier in the week by Bill Riley. This is the Healthy People resource that we stood up last year as part of a separate RFA. The PI is Jeff Hogan, and they're essentially trying to build a platform for conducting mHealth research studies. They're also developing a big cohort that you can tap into, and also a data repository and analysis system to go with that. These are just very quickly some funding opportunities. We partner with, so with this one, this is managed by COVID International. I think a couple of you know about this one already. We also partner with the National Institute of Nursing Research around self-management and adherence to treatments, again, which may be of interest to a few of you. Just to mention that one of the key people in this field is Wendy Gilson. If you haven't met her, I would definitely encourage you to reach out to her. She's a force of nature for connecting people together. She runs the Smart and Connected Health program through NSF. And again, they have a variety of funding opportunities. The final thing that I wanted to mention is that there's a wireless health meeting coming up in October at NIH, and there's currently a late-breaking submission deadline. I think Donna's going to spam everybody later in the week about this, but please think about if there's any of the work you're doing that may be applicable to this. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Melissa, and I apologize for running over, but please feel free to reach out to us and talk with us.